Hey folks, I'm Chuck Black. We're doing 52 weeks of Python in 10-minute sessions. The topic for today is NAPALM. NAPALM being one of these packages that we can use for communicating with devices that provides a lot of abstraction, allows us to call things like get VLANs, get interfaces, get facts, and not have to worry about the device details of either the command or the output that it gives. And we also are using NAPALM in communicating with devices in Quokka Prime. So let's get started looking into it in detail. So let's talk about NAPALM now. You'll remember from this picture that we showed last time that Paramiko, then NetMiko built on Paramiko. NAPALM actually uses NetMiko, which uses Paramiko. And as you go up this food chain, as it were, the actual package, whether it's NAPALM or NetMiko or whatever, handles more of all of the busy work that needs to be done, and all you need to do when we get to NAPALM is handle your own code. And that is because NAPALM has provided a level of abstraction that allows us to do things like getting interface information and counters and things of that nature in a common way, independent of what the device type is that we're communicating with. And so this is what we're going to be looking at when we look at the NAPALM code. Another important thing to notice is that while I've set this up to deal with as many devices as we have, the Cisco sandbox devices like we looked at from NetMiko, yet as you can see down here, only one of these devices is actually listening or awake or available. So we will be using this iOS XR device, which falls into the category of iOS. So let's look at this NAPALM code at a high level and figure out what we need to do. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to call this function called getNetworkDriver. What this is going to do is, based on the device type, it's going to return to us an object that is going to be of the correct type, depending on whether it's Cisco iOS or Juniper or some other Cisco type or whatever. From this driver object, I'm going to create something called a NAPALM device. So I'm going to use the driver that was just returned to us. That's that object. And I'm going to pass in these parameters. Remember, these are keyword parameters. I'm passing them by keyword. I'm passing in the hostname, username, and password. If it's NXOS, that's all I need to pass in because I will be using netconf. If it's not, then I need to be passing in the port, which I'll be using to communicate with the device. So that's all that this if statement here is about. So I'm going to create my NAPALM device by using the driver that was passed back to me. At that point in time, let's look at a high level what we end up doing here. The next thing that we do is we end up calling open. That is actually going to establish our connection via SSH or whatever with that device. Once I have done that, then I can do things like this. I can say get facts, and it doesn't matter what type of device it is or how it's going to do it. Remember, we don't have to worry about that. This abstraction is such that all I need to do is call into using these NAPALM API functions. And so I can say get facts. I can say get interfaces. That gets me the interfaces. I can say get VLANs if that's supported. If it's not, then I'll have an exception. Get SNMP information, get interface counters, and the last thing that we're going to do is get environment. Now, some of these are implemented for all devices, some of them are not. So when we watch this run, we'll get to see which ones are actually implemented. Okay, so let's run our NAPALM example. Remember, we'll just be running it for that one device that we'll be communicating with. So it's connecting to iOS XR. That's the sandbox iOS XR device that is responding to us right now. We've done the connection at this point. It's getting us the facts. It has successfully got us the facts. It has successfully gotten us the interfaces. So you can see all these interfaces. As you can see, you can tell this is a test device. People have been playing around with creating all these different interfaces. So if I can ever get to the end of this, we can try to get VLANs, but for some reason this doesn't work with NAPALM, so I'm not able to get VLANs, it comes back and says not implemented. I can get SNMP information. As you can see, there's not much there. I can call into getting the interface counters. So that is this thing down here, getting me the interface counters. And this is what it returns on the management interface. There's actually some perhaps interesting information, some tunnels that we have interface information for. And the last thing that we attempt to do is to get the environment, and what I found just recently is that it throws an exception within NAPALM, that something about the way that NAPALM did it to get this information from the XR device ended up failing, and consequently I got an exception. So this is kind of a special case exception. Normally I would say I've seen getting key error, I've seen getting IO error, but this is where the NAPALM code actually crashed. So not sure if this device is fully implemented or what, but that's where I printed that out. But the general idea is this. We've called these high-level functions, and it doesn't matter if I'm calling into a Juniper device, into a Cisco device. As you know, Cisco has many different types of devices I can make a request from, and NAPALM, in theory anyway, is going to translate that, providing me this abstraction called getFacts. It will translate that into the correct thing. And if you notice up here, there were two different versions of NXOS. When it was working, NXOS would do netconf, and NXOS SSH actually would do it in SSH. If you want to see that working from the old days when I did the full-length version of this lesson, the long form of this lesson, you can go check it out and you'll see it. What you will see is that basically the same stuff as this, except we'll be going through 3 different devices to get that information. So you may be saying, yeah, but does anybody actually use this? And the answer is yes, both with Quokka Prime and the original Quokka, I do use the functionality provided by NAPALM. Here is my device monitor code. I do a bunch of things in here, including discovery of devices, initially communicating with them. And you can see down here, get device facts. So I actually call this for every device. And what do? I look and determine what the device type is, and I do get network driver just like we saw, and I'm getting it for these types of devices. And the next thing that I'm going to end up doing is getting my NAPALM device. I'm going to do an open on that, and then I'm going to use my NAPALM device, and I'm going to call get facts. And from that, I'm going to extract the version. I'm going to extract the model, and I can also do other stuff if I so chose, but this is the basic functionality. I'm actually using it in a real-world type situation. So NAPALM, very useful, makes our life a whole lot easier in terms of communicating with devices. Okay, so let's review what we talked about. We're talking about NAPALM, and we mentioned how NAPALM provides this level of abstraction that makes us not have to worry about all the differences in commands and output, but there will be a single API that we can use for all devices. All we have to do is get our network driver. From that network driver, we can get our NAPALM device. And once we have the appropriate NAPALM device, we can then open it, and then at that point in time, we can call into different functions and do get facts, get interfaces, get VLANs, etc., and provide us with useful information. Not only is this good in our test example, but I mentioned that we did use it in a real-world situation, my Quokka Prime, and we looked at the code that did that. So we can see that here in my get device facts, I'm actually doing NAPALM stuff to get the information that you see down here. So very useful stuff, NAPALM. Hopefully this made sense. If not, let me know. And as always, thanks for listening.